From the center of the universe and the home of your Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast.
Welcome to the X's and Argos post-game reaction podcast, brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing, as the Toronto Argonauts clinch a playoff spot by downing the Montreal Alouettes 39-10 at BMO Field. Before we get into all the details of this game, I just want to tell you a little bit about Something in the Water, our title sponsor. Make sure you get down to Something in the Water in Liberty Village. They've got the Longboat Pale Ale beer mug. You've got to pick this up. It's $15. It's a great deal. Looks fantastic. And it's got Colonel Troutman on the side. Colonel Troutman's like one of my favorite parts of all the cans at Something in the Water. But I love him for the Something in the Water Longboat Pale Ale, where he's got the blue helmet on. And this being a Longboat mug, of course, you've got Colonel Troutman with the blue helmet. So make sure you pick up one of those. It's a great place to go. I know a lot of fans went down there after the game to grab a drink of Longboat. It's a great place pre-game, great place post-game, right there in Liberty Village, steps from BMO Field, steps from Lamport Stadium, the practice facility. JB, this one was almost over at halftime. This was a shellacking for what was supposed to be a battle for first place in a way. The Alouettes just sort of clinging on to the hope of catching up on the Argos, and that faded quickly today.
Yeah, we when we saw how many players were not going to dress for Montreal, I think we both felt that this was going to be a pretty uphill battle for Montreal, and you're just not going to be able to come into BMO with half a team and beat the best team in the CFL.
No, that's it. And you have to pull out something special. They almost did. There was a Chandler Worthy almost touchdown kickoff return that was saved by Boris Bede. Actually, let's just talk about that play. I know we're way out of order. We often are on the post-game reaction podcast. But did you think when you saw Chandler Worthy break free of everybody and you saw that Boris Bede didn't even really have the angle, did you think there was any way he would catch Chandler Worthy?
Honestly, on that return, it felt like to me, what happened, it felt in hand. It felt like it was a good coverage, and they had Worthy penned in, and he was just able to reverse it, and he caught people sleeping a little. So I was definitely surprised. Sometimes you can see a big return coming. It looked like it was well in hand, and definitely Bede did not have the angle. I didn't think there was any chance he was going to get there. I'm sure Worthy will hear it from his teammates about a kicker crossing the entire field to track him down. Unfortunately, they scored on the next play, which kind of took a bit of the fun out of the play. But it was pretty impressive by Bede to kind of do the rugby heel tackle.
Yeah, he's such a good athlete. Like, we see it at practice with, he plays quarterback for the DBs half the time. He's out there playing corner on the scout team. Bede is a good athlete, but just to have him catch Chandler Worthy from behind. Mike Hogan on the broadcast next to me had already called it a touchdown. And because he was in the clear, there was no one close. I had already given up on the play too. I was just hoping Bede didn't try too hard and pull a hamstring or anything like that, because I was like, well, there's no way he's going to get him. And then somehow he's just so tall. He's 6'4", and he's got that great reach. Was just able to toe tap him, and that was amazing. But yeah, like you said, it's too bad. Like, of all the defense only gave up one touchdown all day. If only they'd found a way to hold that drive to a field goal. That's points that Boris Bede directly took away. So still an amazing play, but yeah, I wish that one ended for his sake in a field goal or less. The Argos defense really shone brightly today. This was a story about all three units producing, but I think the defense went above and beyond. Let's take a look at some of the defensive highlights for the Argos. First of all, they only allowed 10 points total, and the one touchdown they allow is courtesy of a big special teams play. They create, 4 turnovers? They also force a turnover on down, stopping a third and short situation. So it's like 5 turnovers basically for the defense. Like, that's unreal defensive play. They got a couple quarterback sacks in there too. Montreal clearly trying not to get sacked. That was a large part of their game plan. Maybe we'll talk about that a bit later. What did you see in this defense?
Yeah, I mean the defense, like I think that what we thought that the Montreal was kind of average offensively, and the defensive line definitely controlled the running game. There was no chance they were going to get a running game going. Um, Once Montreal's best receiver Mac went out early in the first quarter, that took away the deep threat and really left Montreal unable to move the ball at all. I don't think the defense ran anything particularly elaborate. Just they it wasn't very hard for them to be on top of Montreal. I think the defense just dominated a team that had a lot of twos in.
And I don't think I don't think he was a 29-point difference, but I think it mattered a lot. Like he's their best player on offense. And to have him go out, I don't even know, like, I don't know why he was so angry. Like he seemed to go to the ground with Qantas Stiggers. They're both sort of grabbing each other's jerseys as they went to the ground. And then he just like out of nowhere just punches Stiggers in the face and gets thrown out. Of course you're going to get thrown out. And then a scrum ensued, and there was a lot of pretty aggressive pushing and shoving. Like what was Montreal's problem today? They
I don't know.
seemed just so
I know.
angry.
It kind of started with this, we're not gonna be bullied. We're here too. We're not gonna be overwhelmed. It was a very weird kind of vibe where like they did that, but then it didn't really translate into their play on the field. It was weirdly chippy, like you're like somebody in your neighborhood who you've never met suddenly picking a fight with you.
Yeah,
And
it did
it's
feel
like
odd.
now we're gonna fight. Like who are you? What are you doing? It was weird to have them try and it's like a rivalry that we're not aware of.
Yeah, it felt a lot like that. Let's talk about that run game and how the Toronto defense shut it down. The numbers are odd. I don't know why William Stanback didn't get more. He had 2 carries. Well, now Walter Fletcher led the team in carries with 5, so it's not like running was a big part of it. It just wasn't working. Montreal's leading rusher is Walter Fletcher with 5 carries for 10 yards. Like that was their leading rusher. They have 24 yards rushing total on 11 carries. Toronto just was not going to let Montreal run. That seemed to be a big part. Instead of focusing in on the sacks, it seemed to be, let's force Montreal to beat us through the air, especially once Mac went out. Because they're like, let's just nail down this run. If you can beat us throwing a Cole Speaker and Chandler Worthy and Philpott, then great. But like Walter Fletcher was their leading receiver too. So that shows you not only in yards, but in targets. Like that's how much of a mess this was for Montreal's offensive units. Why they couldn't get anything going. Do you think this was the plan coming in? Just don't let Montreal run?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think that Toronto wanted to focus on Stanback, but we had talked about Montreal was down so many players. I'm not totally sure that Montreal thought that this was a game that they could win and that they were kind of saving up for the second half of the back-to-back. And that's what it felt like. It felt like that they sort of seeded this and, will regroup and come back with a full squad at home in Montreal. And, not that they were trying to lose, but it certainly felt like they realized they were up against it and kind of made some strategic decisions about the split, which is really all they need.
Yeah, now it puts a lot of pressure on them though back at home because they desperately need it. Like I think they would love to have won this game, but like you said, they must have been looking at this as like this is going to be a tough battle. They're missing so many guys. They're like 11 guys that couldn't dress for this game that were banged up in practice this week. They're looking at it. You look at the Stanback carries and you think, yeah, maybe they just didn't want to give him like 15 carries, knowing that they're going to need him next week. I see what you're saying with that. I don't believe they came into this game like if you ask the coaching staff or you ask Cody Fajardo, like, were you trying to win this game? Of course, they're trying to win this game, but they're trying to do it with the healthy bodies they have, and those players just simply aren't as good as some of the other players they've got that they're missing. And once Mac went out, it just seemed like this might be impossible. Now, they had a couple guys step up. Like I thought Cole Speaker did have a really good game, but they couldn't seem to get any rhythm with anyone else. Like I kind of expected more from Sneed. He's played off of Mac's success pretty nicely, and he wasn't really involved. But they just didn't look Montreal did not look as good as they have, or as good as they did the last time these two teams met in Montreal. Remember that was Chad Kelly's only fourth quarter touchdown drive of the season because he hasn't needed any others. Like, he hasn't been in the game trailing in the fourth quarter. There was one time, and that was in Montreal. Montreal gave them a heck of a game that time, and Toronto came from behind to win. But this did not look like the same team. So, yeah, maybe there's a little bit of that. I think that's certainly possible.
Yeah, well, Toronto seems to be innovating a policy of having an amazing first and fourth, and maybe like taking the middle quarters off, and it's really fascinating to watch.
It's weird. Now that mirrored. It mirrored the wind, and I think that was a factor. The wind was a bigger factor than it probably looked if you're watching this game on TV. You could see the flags in the end zone billowing. It was the wind coming off the lake from the south. And when Toronto had the wind in the first quarter, they put up 20 points. That was the majority of their points. They were against the wind in the second and third, scoring only field goals. And then in the fourth, with the wind at their back again, they put up 10. So 30 of their 39 points came with the wind. Montreal couldn't score no matter what when they had the wind or against. Actually, they scored 3 points with and 7 points against. It didn't seem to matter for them. They had trouble moving the football. But yeah, Toronto's offense. What did you make of Toronto's offensive attack today? Because the numbers look fine, but they still don't look like they looked still a little bit out of sorts.
They look really disjointed.
Why? What's causing that? Because it's 2 weeks in a row now where they haven't quite looked right, and I can't pinpoint it. And that's sort of like, it's kind of our job, and I don't know really what to make of it.
There were definitely a couple of passing plays where it looked like players and the quarterback were not on the same page. Whether somebody's supposed to make an en route adjustment based on the defense, or they're just running different routes. I'm not sure, but that definitely happened a couple of times where there was just not on the same page. Like, the ball didn't go anywhere near a receiver. I don't know why that is, but it definitely looked a little disjointed, and you definitely are very surprised at this level to have any time a quarterback throwing to basically nobody. That is odd. So it seems to be a little bit of some miscommunication between the wide receiver core and Chad Kelly a little bit. The running game is going well, but there's definitely some things to tweak there on the other side.
Kelly still finished the day completing 75% of his passes, so like the numbers are good. He's 21 of 28 for 278 yards, no touchdowns or interceptions. But what stands out in the passing game, like of those 7 misses, most of them were like, one was a throwaway where there was a blitz on and he just wanted to get rid of it. Another one, there was tight coverage on DeVaris Daniels on the outside. It looked like he intentionally sailed it over everyone's head because it just wasn't there. But there were 2 misses to DeVaris that I think usually would be touchdowns. Both came on blitzing situations. One was a post route to DeVaris that he was able to get one hand on, but it was just too high and he was wide open. Kelly had all sorts of time. It was a 6-man pressure. AJ Ouellette stayed in there, picked up the blitz really nicely. And Chad Kelly usually in that scenario puts out a nice ball for the touchdown. There it ends up going a little high. DeVaris can only just get a hand on it. That would have been a touchdown pass for him. That would have been his league leading 7th or 8th touchdown pass, I think, or touchdown reception. And then another one, he was going up the seam on a seam route. Again, Kelly had time. He got rid of it and seemed to throw on the opposite side of DeVaris' body. If he leads him inside, it's an easy touchdown. He throws it over his outside shoulder.
Yeah, that was a weird one.
Yeah, it fell incomplete. So it seemed like those 2 guys, and DeVaris has been one of his favorite targets, and yet somehow they just weren't on the same page today. But you know who was on the same page as Chad Kelly? How about Canadian Tommy Neal, the McMaster slotback, who came in for what looked like an injured Cam Phillips. Phillips made a catch on his one target, a beautiful catch on a 23-yarder. I don't know if we saw him much after that. And Neal came in and was lights out, 7 targets, 6 catches, 84 yards. So nice to have Tommy Neal back in the fold.
And like really a shoestring catch away from a huge touchdown catch.
Yeah, I know. Oh, he could have had an even bigger day. That one miss, the one miss that he had, and he was also tackled at like the 2-yard line as well. Like,
yeah, he looked great. I mean, he flashed a little bit last year, and honestly, he looks great. I will say the one thing that kind of jumped out of me, sort of a random connection, is it does strike me that I don't know if I'm not talking about trading Tommy Neal necessarily, but if there was one trade I'd love to see the Argos do, I think that I'd love to see them bring in a veteran quarterback with this roster. I mean, if you look at this roster, which is built to win the championship, if Kelly went down, even if he went down for a quarter, I think you need somebody with a lot of experience to come in. I think you don't want, I think with the way this team is, that's what I would have them go looking for. And like maybe he's a trade piece potentially, because I really do think they need to improve that in the same way how they won the Grey Cup last year and they needed somebody to come in. I don't think their quarterbacks are ready for that. And it kind of came really clear to me today, because clearly this is a team it's just qualified for the playoffs and are on a path to at least compete for the Grey Cup. And, I do wonder if they're going to make something about that.
It's interesting. They do have a lot of talent at the Canadian receiver position. I would hate to lose Tommy Neal, though. He's just so good, and he's such a good special teams player. But that's the thing. You've got 4 Canadian receivers, all of whom contributed today, and all of whom are really not out of place at all as starters on the field. Like if you wanted to start Tommy Neal, he was the best Canadian. He was the best receiver on the field today for either team. And Curly Gittens Jr., we know how good he can be. David Ungerer had a nice game too. 3 catches on 3 targets. He's a guy that just catches every targeted ball he has. And Dejon Brissett, who catches touchdowns. So this is a stacked Canadian receiving core.
I mean, that's what kind of popped into my head. Of like, it's so rich. Maybe they send one to BC, potentially maybe bring Dane Evans in.
Man, it's interesting. And I wonder even like thinking about BC, like the way they use Canadian receivers, like they don't really use them that way, like outside of Cotoy. That's not really a thing they do. So not that you can't, but that's fascinating. I hate to lose any of those guys, but if there's something they've got a lot of right now, it's healthy Canadian receivers who can make a difference. So that's interesting. I don't know who you would target.
Hamilton wants to make a trade, they certainly have lots of quarterbacks.
I know. And Hamilton, they've seen those Canadian receivers beat them up too. Like Tommy Neal had a huge game against them. Was it last year or in his rookie year? And then we've seen, Ungerer, they know very well. Brissett has caught multiple touchdowns against them, and we've seen what Curly Gittens Jr. has done against the Tiger Cats too. So, yeah, they're very familiar with this receiving core. I don't think there's a chance in a million they make a trade, though. I don't know. That's maybe a topic for another time. But yeah, it did stand out today as you're watching all these Canadian receivers run all over the field. They had 3 Canadian receivers out there at one time on a number of occasions, and that's not something that we've seen them do a lot. So interesting.
Just to pull the curtain back again, unfortunately, my computer doesn't have as much juice as I thought it did. So if I suddenly disappear, carry on.
Okay. Can you not plug in while we're doing this?
I'm afraid that I don't want to get too far behind the curtain. I cannot.
Okay. All right. Well, if you suddenly disappear, I'll know why. Yeah. We'll figure out what happened.
Yes, carry on.
All right. And I've got your players of the game and plays of the game, so I can cover you on that. No worries. Let's talk about AJ Ouellette. Massive game, 19 carries, 105 yards, 2 touchdowns. Everyone was running well. Andrew Harris came in and had 6 great carries.
He had like basically that rugby scrum.
Oh yeah.
This crew definitely was not tough on the forward progress.
No, I know. They actually, I thought the game was well officiated today. I felt like they called a good game. They let the guys play. They called what needed to, and they came in. They stepped in when things started to get chippy and sorted it out. It never got out of hand. So I did think.
I mean, maybe it's just being a bit of but I mean, I would have thrown the player who hit Chad in the end zone out. He was 2 yards into the end zone, and he really stepped into him. He could have just put his hands on him and given him a push. Like, he stepped into him. I do think that's a bit
It got
I think
flagged.
that's offside.
Like it did get flagged. It was the
Oh,
ball
yeah. And then
carrier.
they went offsetting.
Yeah, well, because the Toronto stepped in and retaliated.
Yeah, but I mean, come on. Anyways, from a refereeing, I think a quarterback should be protected more. I don't think you should allow a defensive player to have a free shot on a quarterback like that.
I don't love it either, but I thought it was a flag. I didn't think that was an ejection worthy play. I just thought it was one of those like, and he may get fined for it, but quarterback was a runner at that stage too. He just crossed the goal line. Like it was pretty close, but it's clearly in the end zone after the play. But yeah, I don't know. I didn't have as much a problem with that one. I just didn't want to see Chad take a hit. And he took a couple in this game. Didn't get sacked, though. Let's talk about that offensive line. How about this? You know, Chad Kelly has not been sacked since you saw him play in Halifax. That was the last time Chad Kelly took a sack. That's astonishing.
Yeah, the offensive line has been fantastic. I mean, you just don't even notice them. They're just no jailbreaks. They're just getting it done, and then the running game, they're getting it done, and all without Bladak.
Yeah, I know.
Bonkers.
What a luxury, too. Like, if he gets healthy, I don't even know that there's a spot right now. This line's playing so well. A unit that hasn't given up a sack. They gave up a sack in the Calgary loss.
Yeah,
but
I certainly nominate you to tell Bladak that he's not starting.
Yeah, I know, and I'm not going to do that. But I don't know how to disrupt it. Like, the only sacks they've taken were it was when Cameron Dukes was in at quarterback in the loss to Calgary. But the last time that Chad Kelly got sacked was in Halifax. It was weeks and weeks ago. It was like months ago at this point. They just keep a clean sheet every week. And the one time it looked like Chad did get sacked in this game, the Montreal team took a penalty for hands to the face of Isaiah Cage, so that got negated. But he did take a few hits. He held onto the ball really long once, got it out, and just took a shot to the shoulder. And of course, there was the hit on his rushing touchdown, his league-leading rushing touchdown. Like, the stats, and they're still giving touchdown runs to Cameron Dukes. Like, if Chad Kelly was the exclusive short yardage guy, he'd be way out in front of everyone else in the CFL for rushing touchdowns. So, yeah, offensive line playing well, Chad Kelly playing well, even when he doesn't look himself. JB, let's talk about that the special teams play. Javon Leake still with some really nice punt returns, but he didn't spring one. Did you think one of those was going to go? Because it looked to me like one of them had a chance to take off.
Yeah, he definitely did have that one. He kind of was like an up the middle play. Looked like he was going to get there. Yeah, I mean, but again, it's just consistent. The Argos consistently had fantastic field position. It's been terrific to, it just has absolutely changed this team. It's why the team is able to put up 30 every week, because they're beginning every drive at the 45 or the 50. It's like a jamboree where you get the start at half. It's an incredible advantage. It has turned them into the juggernaut that they are.
And the numbers are so funny, too, because Javon Leake has a great day punt returning, 3 returns for 46 yards. It's an average of 15.3. That actually brings his season average down. Like, think about returning 15.3 in a game, and it brings your average down, because he came into this one averaging, I think it was like 16.7 yards per return, which was only 1 decimal place off a CFL record for punt return average. So that's the rarefied air that Javon Leake is dancing in right now. But he's just a threat on every play. You've got the other team thinking about it. Montreal punted out of bounds today. They're hanging them up so that he can't get any momentum going forward. It is in the heads of other special teams coordinators, and that's half the battle on its own. So huge day again from Javon Leake. Even if he doesn't get a touchdown, I think that's massive. JB, let's get into our players of the game. So where are you going for your player of the game in this one?
Once again, I think let's start the siren up again for defensive Eastern Conference defensive MVP. Darius Pickett, incredible signing, incredible player. So variable and multiple in what he can do on the field. Had 2 fumble recoveries. Is a tackling machine. Is absolutely the best player on the defense. So once again, I got to go Pickett.
And against his old team too. You know, when you look at that Montreal linebacking core from last year, you've got like Therese Beverette is still in Montreal, but Ouellette leaves, goes to Calgary, and he's having the season of his life. He's in like defensive MVP conversations. And Darius Pickett comes to Toronto. He's in defensive MVP conversations. Montreal's got to be kicking themselves at losing those two guys, especially when Pickett's the one taking it to them today. Well, you mentioned those 2 fumble recoveries. Both of them were really savvy.
You could have 2 former Alouettes win the 2 defensive MVPs. It's pretty good.
I know. Like it's so frustrating to watch as your former guys are like, how does that happen? But yeah, Pickett, the one I think the tap out of bounds was almost more impressive, but they were both great. So on one play, it's a completed pass. I feel like it was completed to Cole Speaker, and I think it was Williams that knocked it free. Jordan Williams punched the ball out, and Pickett, just as he's always around the football, sees that on the ground, picks it up, is able to get a pretty nice return out of it as well. The other one on the sideline was great. Jamal Peters comes in and just levels the Montreal player. The ball pops straight up in the air towards the sideline. It bounces, and just before it's bouncing out, Pickett dives and knocks it out of bounds because he knows that rule. It's just a very heads-up play to have the wherewithal to know that on a fumble in the CFL, you just need to knock it out of bounds, and that's considered possession. And that happened twice in this game. Once was Pickett's, the other Jack Cassar. How about a shout out for Jack Cassar on special teams? A ball comes free. Benoit Marion knocks the ball free. Cassar knocks it out of bounds to take over. Like these are huge heads up plays that Toronto's defense and special teams are making on a day where the offense was good, but not necessarily the juggernaut offense we've seen sometimes. Everybody steps up and plays a role. But yeah, back to the topic at hand, Darius Pickett, defensive player of the game. I think that's a no-brainer. For me, my player of the game has got to be AJ Ouellette. 19 carries, 105, 2 touchdowns. Had 1 target, no catches out of the backfield. They were feeding him, and you saw him motioning to the Toronto sideline on a number of occasions where he'd have a big carry and he'd look over to the sideline. He's like, yeah, again. There's a series in like the third quarter where they had stuffed Ouellette a few times in a row, but you just knew that they're not going to continue to do that on every play. It's hard to tackle AJ Ouellette in the first quarter. It must be terrifying to tackle him when you're like barely holding it together. You're battered and bruised, fourth quarter of a blowout game. I don't think anyone wants any part of AJ Ouellette coming downhill. And he had a couple nice runs where once he got that momentum going, these poor halfbacks and safeties that have to come in and stop him, not a position that I would envy at all. So he's my player of the game. I thought he had a real spark for the offense, and he was the one sort of consistent factor today offensively with both scores and a couple long runs. So yeah, he gets my player of the game. A couple shout outs. We got to shout out Tommy Neild. He had the best training camp of any Toronto Argos receiver, ended up getting a concussion, went on the 6-game injured list. And when he came back, was just a numbers victim. There wasn't a spot for him because everyone was playing so well. Finally gets on the field and leads the Argos in targets and yardage. So shout out to Tommy Neild. In any other game, he might be our game MVP. But yeah, just getting a shout out this week. All right, JB, where are you going for your play of the game?
As I mentioned to you, maybe the opening toss. There weren't many sort of turning points in the game. I suppose for me, the AJ Ouellette 15-yard touchdown run was kind of the defining play of the game, where Toronto's talent and determination was just too much for a shorthanded Montreal team. And that moment kind of crystallized that, where they just didn't have the players who could make that stop.
Yeah, I didn't. It didn't look like anyone wanted any part of that play. AJ Ouellette got ahead of steam. He built up like speed for 10 yards, and you had him just flying at DBs. He ricocheted off somebody, and it was just such a momentum-turning series. Like my play of the game is actually going to tie into that play, and I'll get to that in a second. But let me just finish my thought on AJ Ouellette, and maybe something I should have said in the previous segment when we were talking about him as my player of the game. But he's so hard to bring down. On his second touchdown run, he was hit really hard by Sean Lemon, and to bounce off Sean Lemon as though it were nothing that's not something that normal human beings do. He just kept the legs turning, kept upright. Like, that can't feel good for either of them. But yeah, he was just a machine today. So you can imagine as a safety or as a halfback, like 10-yard head start. No, thank you. I don't want any part of that. My play of the game happened a couple plays before your play of the game. It was such a momentum changer. So the Argos are leading 7-0. They kick off to Chandler Worthy. Benoit Marion comes down, knocks the ball out. Jack Cassar knocks the ball out of bounds. They take over. It's a short field, which Toronto's been on the positive end of multiple times this season. And that's like 2 plays later. That's AJ Ouellette running in for the touchdown. So my play of the game is that turnover on the kickoff. And that leads to your play of the game, the touchdown run. Because once it's 14-0, obviously the game's not over there. It wasn't even midway through the first quarter. But you've built a mountain for Montreal. Montreal's a team that's had trouble scoring touchdowns. They're in a slump right now. They can't buy a win at the moment. To put them down 14-0, and I don't even remember if they'd lost. I don't think they'd lost Mac yet, but they were just about to. It was a hill they weren't going to be able to climb. So those 2 plays of the game, that puts it away early for Toronto. So yeah, this is it. They go into this week now, JB, with a chance to clinch the East Division if they can win their next game against the Montreal Alouettes. It's Friday night. It's in Montreal, a tough place to play. Slightly shorter week, 6 days on this one for the Friday night matchup. But yeah, I can't wait for this one. You know the Argos are going to be fired up trying to clinch the East on September 15th. It's so early in the season to be talking about clinching the East, but that's where the Argos stand now, thanks to putting up a 10-1 record. That will just about do it for us on this post-game, what is this thing called? The post-game reaction podcast. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
Go, Toronto Argos, go, go, go. Pull together, fight the foe.